Writer's Branding.
Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio, welcoming you to another edition of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org, for more info, or you can email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have Rachel G. Carrington. We'll be discussing her fantastic book, The Early Years, a memoir. Available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or if you guys want to get everything that Rachel has to offer, do yourself a favor and go directly to her personal site, rachelgcarrington.co. There, not only will you be able to find more information on Rachel herself, but you'll find more information on the book, The Early Years, as well as find hyperlinks set up to take you to the purchasing page. So one more time, that's rachelgcarrington.co. Rachel was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by some of the best movers in the business, Writers Branding Publishing. So if you have a book that you'd like moved, move it through Writers Branding. You can find them at writersbranding.com. And guys, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Rachel here on the line because first and foremost, she's a returning guest. Okay, so we had her here on the network not too long ago, and many of you may actually remember the interview. But the interview went so well, we had to invite Rachel back on. It was just that good. Now, we're going to be discussing her book today, and of course, as it says right there in the title, it's a memoir. So of course, it's taken directly from her personal life and her personal experience. But what I love so much about the book is, guys, keep in mind, as you're going through and you're listening to this interview, and even when you head on over to her personal website and you purchase the book, always remember that even though you're learning from her particular experience, how can this benefit and relate to your life? What messages, what themes can be pulled and applied to your life? Because really, when you stop and you analyze it, you may not be able to relate to every specific circumstance, but I promise you, the underlying message and theme will be something that connects and relates to everyone involved. And listen, Rachel is the expert. She's written the book. She's going to be able to articulate all the nuances in it much better than I ever could. So without further ado, let's bring her here on the line with us. Rachel, first and foremost, thank you again for being a guest with us today on People of Distinction. How are you?
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here, and I'm fine.
Wonderful. Well, listen, it is a blessing to have you back on. It's an honor to have you back on again to talk about your book. Now, Rachel, I know we have so much information to cover. Before we get into the book itself, and even though it's a memoir, this question may end up slipping into the book, and if it does, totally fine. But let's start by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I was born in a southern Kentucky town in the early 1930s, in fact, 1930, right at the Great Depression time. My family was a hard-working family. My dad had a good job, but it was kind of hard to take care of a family of 11, as I was the oldest of a family of 11.
Wow.
Coming pretty quickly after my birth, too, a lot of them. So that's where I got my start, and that's where my story starts. And then it moves on up into Ohio, where I lived most of my life. But I was just, when the story started, I was just a child. I was kind of a rebel, and I know it now. I never knew it at the time. But my parents set very strict rules, especially I was being born first. I guess I got the worst of it because they had to learn on me. But I would question a rule if it didn't make sense. And my answer would always be, because we said so. That was why. And some of them I wouldn't obey because it didn't make sense. I would quietly rebel, not very noticeable, but my parents did notice that I didn't do as I was told often. But anyway, My dad was very, very proud of me as a child, starting into school and all, because I made good grades. And he wanted me each day to tell him all I'd learned in that day. So he was very interested in our educations, the family's educations as we grew up. And all my plans were to become a teacher. But it didn't quite go there. Something happened, and I'll not give any spoilers, but something happened to keep me from going to college to be a teacher, even though I'd had the offer of a scholarship that would have paid for everything for my schooling. And my dad was so happy. But something happened that I turned it down. That's all in my book, and I'm not going to tell you too much about the book. It is a memoir. Even so, it reads like a love story. And it kind of softens the message of inspiration in a book that was written, actually. I expected it to be only read by my family when I went to get it published. But my publisher talked me into releasing it for a book to the public, saying that it could be inspiration to others. It's a touching story about a life well lived with actual living people carrying on as the story continues. Of course, a lot of them are gone these days because that was many, many years ago. I started writing my current book rather late in life, and I have a big desire to complete my story, and it should come out in the second book that I'm hoping to be able, by the grace of God, to have published. I have an eye problem that is slowing me down on my work, especially my long hours of writing, like I put on in for my first book. But anyway, it's my story. It's the life of my family, making it unique in its own way.
You know, Rachel, thank you so much for articulating all of that to us. I mean, what an amazing journey that you've had, and what a wonderful family it sounds like you come from. I mean, the oldest of 11 children. That is fantastic. I mean, never a dull moment in that household, I'm sure. Now, Rachel, I'm curious, how did you get into writing?
Well, it came mostly from my husband of 62 years. He'd always wanted me to write a book because he said, we've had such a fantastic life, Ruth. He said, I'd really like for you to put it in writing so that our family can see how we live. Give them inspiration to make their choices and try to have a successful life like we've had. And then I had talked to at one of my, I got together with my sisters a lot. I had 8 sisters. After I was married and had my family, we would get together for weekends called the sister sessions, we'd call them. And we'd talk about our lives. And, my being the first of the 8, the youngest ones were I wasn't even home when they were born. So they wanted to know about my life. Well, I started one evening telling my life story. And it turned out to be pretty much like this book, following the same thing that my book has. But it took many nights. We were there 4 nights that weekend, and every night I told them another chapter of the story. Well, there were some more chapters than I could tell in 4 nights talking, so they really got on the bandwagon about wanting me to write it, at least write it down and give it to them. I said, well, that's a lot of writing. They said, why don't you write a book? That way we can read it in a book. So I had their urgings added to my husband's already, and then from my friends started, because they knew that they'd seen a lot of short stories I'd written and really were intrigued by them because it was parts of my life, and they urged me. So therefore I decided to write my book. my husband was such a support throughout our life, and anything we chose to do, he planned. We set goals. We tried to make them realistic, but we set goals so that we could have a better life for our children, because we started out with nothing. And we gradually gained the ability to live more like we wanted to live, our children to be able to live. And so that was one of the main reasons for the book, was to be as inspiration to them. And now that my book is published, my reviews from people, many reviews from the readers, and reviews from my professional reviews too have mentioned the fact that it's a very inspirational book. And I never really thought of it as inspiration, but we did, we wanted to teach our kids, and we always made sure we agreed on the tactics we used, and of course we trusted in God to help us, to strengthen us as we went through what we planned. And he did. And this is just, our life was just something that I would not want to change very much. Of course, I've lost people in my life. We've lost a daughter to cancer.
Oh, so sorry.
We had seven children. We still have 6 of them. They're all very responsible people. We've never had any problems with our kids, because my husband's his way of doing things that they like to do, setting up things for the family that they like to do. They stayed pretty close to the family, and we even at one time, and that will be mentioned in another book, not this one, we had a professional water ski show. But our kids learned to ski as babies, really. And we put on water ski shows for 7 years. And it wasn't just our family. It started out that way. But seven kids and 2 parents couldn't put on an our show very well. And that's what people wanted, was an our show. It started accidentally because we camped on a lake in Kentucky called Lake Cumberland. And it was just developing at that time, and a lot of fishing facilities were going in that sold all kinds of supplies for fishing, boats, all kinds of things. Well, we had been out doing some of our tricks, like building pyramids was one of our specialties. One day, one afternoon, a boat came to our dock and said, "Are you the family that puts on shows?" Well, we hadn't thought of ourselves as a family who put on shows. So that's what he said. We're getting ready to open this weekend, open our business. And he said, we'd planned some entertainment. He said, but to top it off, we'd like a water ski show. So we put on a 45-minute show of just things that my husband taught my kids. Actually, we had never seen a water ski show. My husband was good at imagining what he could do and worked with the kids till he could get it perfected. And we had some really neat tricks. We found out later that some of them, but not all, were in the big water ski show that was in Florida at the time that we first started. We had heard about it and wanted to go visit it, but never did. But that was just the way my husband was. He always wanted to do things the kids liked, and they loved the water. They loved camping, and he would kind of go along with what they liked and plan things for us on the weekend. And his motto was, the family that that plays together stays together. And it was very successful for us. but that's not the book now. So I get carried away sometimes when I think about the things my family's done.
I love it, Rachel, because again, as you stated before, you're so passionate about the subject matter in which you've written about. So it just leads you down these tangents and you just go off. And I absolutely love it because, and I think this is where really the power of this book lies. Is I'm sitting here and I'm listening to all of the experiences and the memories that you're sharing to me as well as our listening audience. And naturally, I am now thinking of my family and our memories that we've created in the past and quirky little things that we have done together growing up. And I truly feel that that is so much of the benefit of your narrative. Is yes, we're learning about your particular experience and the journey that you have taken with your large and absolutely fantastic family. But it really will help connect people to theirs and hopefully inspire others to create their own memories, create their own things that they will do together with their family. And as your husband said and articulated so very well, the family that plays together stays together. And hopefully that will inspire so many other families to play together. I absolutely love that. Guys, again, here on the line with Rachel G. Carrington. We're discussing her fantastic book, The Early Years, a Memoir. Available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or directly through her personal site, racheljcarrington.co. Now, Rachel, as we continue on with this interview and start to tie it up, because again, the information that you've relayed thus far is fantastic. I'm curious, what would you say sets your book apart from other books of the same genre?
I ask that question a lot, Benji, and I really do not know how to answer it, except that it was our life, and our life was unique in a lot of ways, I'm sure. But it's just, it's heartfelt. What I wrote in my book is my memories. And speaking of memories, I have a little something to add to that. People would say, how do you remember all those details? Well, for many years, starting as a teenager, I kept a diary and then went on to keeping journals daily that I would miss some days, but it was a daily entry type journal. And I jotted things down. And but in 1989, a major flood hit Ohio. It was called the 100-Year Flood. And water came to our home was flooded, and water stayed in our basement for 3 days before the fire department could get to us to pump it out. And my journals were stored there. And when I got ready to write the book, I had nothing to go on because they were relegated to the trash can. So, but you know what? It wasn't hard like I expected. I would be writing and one memory would key another. And I finally put got two screens going on my computer at the same time. One, I would jot down things that a memory would trigger, another memory that would be triggered in a call, on one of the screens, and the other was my manuscript. And then at the end of the day, I'd go back and go into that listing and place the memories where they belonged for the next day to work on. So I did a lot of that. It took me a while to write the book, which is, I guess, often the case. I've only written the one book, so I really cannot. I'm not a judge of that. But it did take me about 2 years to write it. And I did most of my writing in Hawaii because that's where we spent the winters. But I did not write my book while my husband was still alive. It's just something that I wanted to do because he always wanted it written. And I just, as a tribute to him, I started to write the book. And it was so beneficial to me because I was in my grieving period from losing him. lost him in 2009 to cancer.
I'm so sorry.
So anyway, that's where I stand today. I'm to the point that I've got the other book pretty much finished, except that it's more or less a documentary at this time, as I started with my first book. But you go in and you put things in it to make it a story rather than a documentary. And people say, you added fiction? No, I didn't add fiction. I added it like it was, but I just stated it in a different way.
There you have
so
it.
That's pretty much the book.
There you have it. You know, Rachel, listen, as we tie up this fantastic interview, last question, and I really just want to impress it. I can assume, of course, what the message is, but we have you here on the line, so we might as well get it directly from your mouth. In totality, what is the message of your book that you're hoping your readers will be able to pick up on?
You know, no matter what their walks of life have been, there are bits and pieces that they could pick up, I'm sure, from the way we lived our life that they could apply to their own, that may make it better. I'm not saying that mine is coming from anyone who knew much about life, but it was what we lived. And my husband was very good at that kind of, at planning ahead. I know there were times that when we were first married that when our tax bill would be about due, I would start to worry about where's this money coming from to pay our tax bill. And he'd always say, honey, don't worry, I'll find a way. And he could always find a way. That would solve our problem. Like he'd say, if I don't come up with the money before, I'll sell a cow. We lived on a farm, so he said, I'll sell a cow.
There you have it. There you have it. Guys, listen, what a fantastic, fun-filled journey. I mean, what more can be said? You know from looking back and examining your own life. Listen, it's not all roses and butterflies, right? There's going to be hills, there's going to be valleys, there's ups and downs. And Rachel showcases that in her book. It's a true, authentic description of her fantastic life that, again, will hopefully inspire you to embark upon your own journey down memory lane with your family and hopefully inspire you to create some new ones along the way. You know what you got to do. Head on over to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, go directly to her personal website, rachelgcarrington.co, and pick up your copy of The Early Years, a memoir by Rachel G. Carrington. You surely will not be disappointed.
Always check at their libraries or their local bookstores because it's but I don't know what bookstores. I mean, I couldn't lead them there, but they could check because people, my readers told me they got the book from the library or they got it from Barnes & Noble downtown or, so I know that it is in some bookstores.
Absolutely. There you have it. Listen, wherever books are sold, check it out. You surely will not be disappointed. Rachel, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you very much for being a guest with us on People of Distinction.
The pleasure's been all mine, Benji. I loved my interview from you before, and it's just been great this time. So thank you so much.
Writers Branding.